Good evening, folk, and I'm back again. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you to all those who watched my first video. If you haven't seen that one, then you can find it on the channel page. And I thought today I would talk a little bit about what could possibly be my favourite tank from the Second World War, from the 30s, we'll say. My favourite tank from the 30s. Now, don't worry, I haven't made a mistake. You are looking at a Japanese tank. Shock, horror, surprise. And it is the Chiha medium tank. Now, first, before I go into why I like this tank, let's go through some of the statistics for it. So, there was 1,162 of these tanks made. They have 4 crew members: a driver, assistant driver / gunner, commander, and then assistant gunner / radio operator. The power plant in this thing was a air-cooled V12 diesel engine. Its top speed was 40 miles per hour. It was armed with a Type 95 57 millimeter anti-tank gun, and it had 2 7.7 millimeter Type 97 machine guns. One in the front there, and then the other we'll get to in a minute is the rear of the turret. And its armour ranged from 8mm to 25mm, assuming the 25mm will be concentrated on the turret and around the front, which were the most vulnerable areas, and obviously if they're further back and on top, it would have been a lot thinner, the 8mm. They were weighed in at 14.3 tons. Now, that's nothing to be, that's respectable tonnage. For example, the loading cranes at work, they can lift to a maximum of 15 tons. So, no. And with tonnage as well, important not to play top trumps, I think, with tonnage, because the heavier something is doesn't mean it's better. In fact, the heavier something is, that could be considered a bad thing. It's about getting the balance between armour and weight. The more heavy something is, the more often it will bog down, the better infrastructure you need. And being a Japanese tank, it was built to be fighting inside of Asia, in the less developed road systems, having to work off the Japanese narrow gauge railway. So again, that's why it's quite narrow, more narrow than Western medium tanks, because it needs to fit on the narrow gauge railway. And if you've got a lighter tank as well, you can get it to more places. So a bit about why I like this tank for a tank in the 30s. Because to me, it seems to be the right tank for the right war. It fought and performed well in the Battle of Kohalink, the border war between Russia and Japan. It performed well in that. It performed admirably against the Chinese in the 30s, and in the Second Sino-Japanese War, and continuing in when that war merged with the Second World War. In the early stages, this was the tank that spearheaded the Blitzkrieg, the Eastern Blitzkrieg up into Burma and down through Malaya, and this was a tank that was took into the Philippines and defeated their American opponents with. So for its day, it was a good tank. The reason, though, why I think Japanese tanks get the reputation they do is because they were not a match for they weren't a match for a Sherman, basically. When the Allies upgunned and got better tanks, this thing just couldn't deal with it. So they did make a Shinoto variant that had a larger gun, It had the Type 1 47mm anti-tank gun, and it has redesigned turret to accommodate that, and 20 to 33mm of armour, and it came in at 6 tons. But Japan didn't have the industry and never seemed to bring the tank designs forwards, or at least not soon enough. And by the time they were looking at doing that, and you've got to remember as well, steel production, that technical expertise is all being soaked up by the Navy to make the Yamato and to replace the carriers that were being lost in the cruise and that. So the tanks were never done, and in the Pacific War, especially in the island hopping. So when I'm finding as the Chinese, now the Chinese were getting American supplied equipment and Allied supplied equipment, but up until then they had a limited number of Panzer ones, a limited number of Italian tanks, and a limited number of older FT-17s. So when these things were in China, they were basically unopposed. They were coming up against anti-tank guns. Anti-tank rifles were popular, but really, so really they weren't coming up against anything until the Western Allies got involved, until they were in island hopping campaigns against, or fighting in Burma against the British, and island hopping campaign against the Americans. These things just couldn't hold their own, because but for the time they were built, for the 30s, they were a really awesome tank, I think. So anyway, just gonna have a quick look at my model here. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the back gun here. Now the thing, I like that back gun. Now I think quite a lot of, particularly war games and some video games, get the idea of a rear-facing gun absolutely wrong. And they make up some rules saying, you can only shoot it in certain circumstances. The circumstances that rear gun would be used was whenever the tank commander decided he wanted to use that rear gun. So in the same way how the main cannon at the front here is mounted on a turret, so it can be pointed in any direction, 360 degrees, as I'm sure we're all familiar on how turrets work. That applies exactly the same for the rear gun. So if there's enemy infantry in front of it, and you've got one machine gun shooting at it, and let's say if you don't want to use the main round in it for whatever reason, mainly because it's harder to aim and quickly sight that. Let's say, if, for example, when they were storming through, breaking through in the Malaya campaign, when they were charging down the main road, or using the old road that zigzagged across the new main road, and shooting up Allied positions, quite a lot of damage was done with machine guns, and they only tended to use the main cannons when they were facing anti-tank guns or armoured cars or dug in positions they need to destroy. Other than that, they'll be shooting the main gun. And we see lots of pictures, or I see lots of pictures anyway, of Japanese tanks, including the smaller high-go tanks, will be destroyed with their, like that, with the two guns hanging forwards. Now, if you're if you're attacking infantry, which aren't dug in, so aren't in pre-prepared fortified positions, in foxholes, trenches, that if they're just taking cover where they can, and they're fairly out in the open, why not just point 2 machine guns at them and shoot them down? You only need to keep their heads down until you break through the lines, get in their rear area, and then your infantry coming behind this thing will come and mop them up and deal with them. So anyway, that's a little bit about the Chi-Hi even, Chi-Hi medium tank, and why I think it was one of the best tanks in the 30s. So that's the end of the video, and again, if I got anything wrong, or if you disagree with me, put it in the comments, and I'll see you all later.